watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's top stories. President Vladimir Putin's spokesman calls the downing of a Russian warplane in Syria a very serious incident, just as Turkish fighter jets shoot down a warplane. The man who loaned his Paris apartment to the suspected ringleader of the attacks on the city and claimed he did not know appears before a French judge. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry begins a visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories by describing a wave of Palestinian knife and car ramming attacks as terrorism. Good afternoon to all our viewers. We begin today with President Vladimir Putin's spokesman. He called the downing of a Russian Su-24 warplane in Syria a very serious incident, but said it was too early to draw any conclusions. This comes as Turkish fighter jets shot down a Russian warplane near the Syrian border after repeated warnings over airspace violations. But Moscow said it could prove the jet had not left Syrian airspace. It was the first time a NATO member's armed forces have downed a Russian or Soviet military aircraft since the 1950s, and Russian and Turkish assets fell on fears of an escalation between the former Cold War enemies. Russia's defense ministry said one of its fighter jets had been downed in Syria and that according to information, the pilots were able to eject. However, it said the aircraft had been over Syria for the duration of its flight. The Turkish military said the aircraft had been warned 10 times in the space of 5 minutes about violating Turkish airspace. Officials said a second plane had also approached the border and been warned. Belgium has asked Morocco to share any intelligence it has to help track a key suspect in connection with the Paris attacks, according to the Interior Ministry in Rabat. A statement said King Philippe made the request in a telephone conversation with Morocco's King Mohammed VI, calling for close cooperation in the fields of intelligence and security. Morocco's Interior Ministry Mohammed Hassad and his Belgian counterpart Jean Jamon later discussed ways of implementing concretely and immediately the request, which follows a similar one from Paris. Moroccan intelligence helped put French investigators on the trail of the Belgian jihadists suspected of orchestrating the November 13 terror attacks in Paris. A Moroccan tip-off, along with other information, helped police track Abdelhamid Abaoud, a Belgian of Moroccan descent, to an apartment block in a northern Paris suburb where he was killed in a raid last Wednesday. Belgium has charged 4 people over the Paris assault, including 2 on suspicion of helping alleged Paris attacker Salam, a French citizen, with escaping to Brussels after the attacks. The man who loaned his suburb apartment to the suspected ringleader of the attacks on the city and accomplices, but claimed he did not know who they were, was sent before a French judge. Jawad Ben Dawood, who sparked a flurry of mocking social media memes for an interview he gave protesting his innocence as the police assault on the apartment in Saint-Denis was ongoing, was arrested soon afterwards. Police targeted the apartment in northern Paris while hunting the attack's suspected ringleader Abdelhamid Abaoud. He was killed during the police raid along with a woman thought to be his cousin Hasna Eid Boulahsin and another as yet unidentified man. Police were tipped off to his possible involvement when they saw a man who resembled him talking with Eid Boulahsin the night before the raid. Prime Minister Tamam Salam described talks led by former PM Saad Hariri to end the political stalemate in Lebanon as positive, emphasizing that talks are underway for cabinet to convene. Any meeting or bilateral or joint dialogues between Lebanese political parties, if it favors the country's best interest, is considered positive, Salam told An-Nahar newspaper. Hariri has launched a flurry of political activity aimed at reaching an accord to break the deadlock that has left Lebanon without a president for 18 months, according to March 14 sources. The former PM had met with Kataib Party leader MP Sami Jmail and Progressive Socialist Party leader MP Wali Jumlat. Media reports also say that he held talks with Marada movement leader MP Sulaiman Fanjiyeh, but both sides denied the occurrence of the meeting. Asked about the possibility of calling for a cabinet session anytime soon, the PM said that contacts are underway to form a mechanism for exporting waste, which had been preliminarily adopted during the last dialogue session. Foreign Minister Jabran Basil stressed that military action alone will not be able to defeat terrorism that has spread throughout the world. He said in a speech before various diplomats on the occasion of Independence Day, quote, "We cannot celebrate independence until we defeat terrorism. Takfiri and Islamic State-linked terrorism will not defeat us, and neither will Israel. We have long demanded the establishment of an international coalition to confront terrorism. As he has stressed, should we wait for attacks against more sects to be able to unite in words and action in a movement? As he also continued saying, we will celebrate Independence Day once there has been an adheration to the voice of the people and a rejection of complete foreign meddling. Spain is ready to help Lebanon confront the challenges it faces due to the Syrian crisis. Visiting Defense Minister Pedro Moreno said, urging political rivals to elect a new head of state and end the political standstill. He underlined that the presence of more than 1 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon posed difficulties on the Lebanese state and that they are ready to cooperate with its various aspects, security as well as social.
It has been a very interesting conversation due to the fact that Lebanon and Spain, we share our concerns regarding the security situation in this area of the world, and as well we have considered that the problem of security now is affecting all our countries, not only the countries in this area. Lebanon is a good example for all of us, particularly for Spain, and how to manage diversity. Prime Minister has mentioned something that it is very important, and it is that today our societies are based on diversity, and that some people in the world do not want that this diversity, this capacity to living together could be accepted as a way of modern style of life based on freedom, values, democracy, and acceptance of the other as a basis of living together.
Coming up next, British singer Adele's new album sells a record 2.3 million copies in the U.S. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news here on Future Television. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry began a visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories by describing a wave of Palestinian knife and car ramming attacks as terrorism that must be condemned. He said at the start of the meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that they would discuss ways to work together to restore calm. With U.S.-backed Palestinian statehood negotiations frozen since 2014, Netanyahu said there could be no peace while an onslaught of terror continued. Shortly before Kerry, Netanyahu convened in Jerusalem. A Palestinian drove his car into 3 Israeli soldiers and a paramilitary border policeman along a road in the occupied West Bank, injuring all 4.
It's very clear to us that the terrorism, these acts of terrorism which have been taking place, deserve the condemnation that they are receiving. And today I express my complete condemnation for any act of terror that takes innocent lives and disrupts the day-to-day life of a nation. Israel has every right in the world to defend itself. It has an obligation to defend itself, and it will, and it is. I'm here today to talk with the Prime Minister about the ways that we can work together, all of us, the international community, to push back against terrorism, to push back against senseless violence, and to find a way forward to restore calm and to begin to provide the opportunities that most reasonable people in every part of the world are seeking for themselves and for their families.
There can be no peace when we have an onslaught of terror, not here, not anywhere else in the world which is experiencing this same assault by militant Islamists and the forces of terror. Israel is fighting these forces every hour. We're fighting them directly against the terrorists themselves. We're fighting also against the sources of incitement, and we believe that the entire international community should support this effort. It's not only our battle, it's everyone's battle. It's the battle of civilization against barbarism.
Iran-backed rebels in Yemen have blown up several bridges in the mountain in southwestern Taiz province to hamper the advance of pro-government forces. Government forces backed by air and ground support from a Saudi-led coalition launched an all-out offensive last week to push the rebels out of Taiz and break the siege of loyalists in its provincial capital. Taiz is seen as crucial for the recapture of other central provinces and for opening the way to the rebel-controlled capital, Sana'a, farther north. It is also important for securing the south, where loyalists have retaken 5 provinces since July, including Aden, seat of the provincial government of President Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi. The Houthi rebels on Monday blew up several bridges leading to Rahida to prevent the advance of loyalist forces, according to one of the sources in a reference to the province's second largest city. Whether traveling by train, bus, or plane, travelers departing from around Washington, D.C. admitted to feeling on edge in wake of the recent deadly Paris attacks and threats made against the United States by Islamic State militants. Amtrak Police Chief Polly Hansen insisted her staff were doing all they could to make travelers feel safe, including conducting random bag searches. Last week, Islamic State warned in a new video that countries taking part in the airstrikes against Syria would suffer the same fate as France and threatened to attack in Washington. On Monday, the U.S. State Department also issued a worldwide travel alert, saying several militant organizations may be planning attacks in multiple regions. But one traveler departing from Ronald Reagan Washington Airport said he refused to be afraid. Others were more wary, some about security, others about how recent events would affect Muslim travelers. Nearly 47 million Americans are expected to travel over this Thanksgiving weekend. British singer Adele's new album, 25, has sold a record 2.3 million copies in the United States in the first 3 days of its release, according to Nielsen Music. The monster sales for the first 3 days mean Adele will break the first week sales record currently held by boy band NSYNC's 2000 album, No Strings Attached, which opened with 2.4. Adele's independent UK label, Extra Large Recordings, last week decided to withhold 25 from online streaming platforms such as Apple's music service, privately owned Spotify, and Google Play. 25 racked up more than 900,000 sales in Apple's U.S. iTunes store on its first day. The much-anticipated album has been driven by the success of its lead single, the heartbreak ballad Hello, which debuted last month and has sold more than 2.5 million digital copies. The song has been #1 on Billboard's digital song charts for 4 consecutive weeks. Now, with these week's sales, the new album has driven more and more fans online streaming to consume music. Taylor Swift's 1989 album was the last record to achieve that milestone when it opened with nearly 1.3 million copies last year. And France was the big winner of the 43rd International Emmy Awards, taking home 3 statuettes for Best Drama, Arts Programming, and TV Movie miniseries. Brazil came in second, taking home the international accolades for Best Telenova and Comedy. The annual gala event was attended by over 1,000 international television professionals and was hosted by Egyptian comedian Bassem Youssef at the New York Hilton. Youssef, known as the Jon Stewart of the Middle East, said that he hoped to be a positive influence. He says, "I am the first non-European, non-American person to host the International Emmys. I'm an Arab from the Middle East, and that is a great honor." He said this before the start of the event. Hollywood star Michael Douglas presented the honorary International Emmy Directorate Award to Richard Pepler, chairman and CEO of HBO. Downton Abbey creator Julianne Fellows was honored with the International Emmy Founders Award. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. President Vladimir Putin's spokesman calls the downing of a Russian warplane a very serious incident. The Turkish fighter jet said it was not in their airspace. The man who loaned his Paris suburb apartment to the suspected ringleader of the Paris attacks claimed he did not know who they were, appears before a French judge. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry begins a visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories by describing a wave of Palestinian attacks as terrorism that must be condemned. Those are your Tuesday headlines here live on Future Television. I'm Yuma Nova signing off. Have a good night.